Hello, assalamu alaikum everyone. Hello. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Adil, how are you? How is everyone doing? Excited for the Monday? The best, the best day. The best of the best. Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you? Uh, I'm actually very excited about Monday because I don't have to work and I am free, which is awesome. Shukar hai 6 p.m. start hoti meri. That's good. Hey Harry, how are you? Harry Shimar. Is it Harry Shimar? Am I pronouncing it right? Hifsa, hey, how's it going? You folks are up pretty late. Alhamdulillah, doing well. That's awesome. That's great. I'm really happy to see you everyone here. Flu hai tabhi. Ah, damn. I also have flu, pata hai? I also have flu. Not really flu, maybe, but just a runny nose. But I'm with you. I'm not really well as well. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to have as much liquid as possible. So mostly water, but then also tea as much as I can. So yeah, do the same. Have a lot of water as much as possible. Yeah, you too, brother. You too. Get well soon. Husnan or Hasnan Asim, good to see you too, brother. How are you? How is everyone in the chat? I have green tea in hand. Awesome. Yes, then that makes sense. Then you're on the right track. Hopefully you'll get well soon, really fast, inshallah. Awesome. So I was saying I am happy about Monday because I don't have to work. Tomorrow is a holiday for me, and then I'm joining the new company on Tuesday. So yeah, it's relaxing time, to be honest. Let me also turn on this light. Yes. No, it looks good. So yes, it's gonna be fun. Bro, I was trying to run a GitHub repo JavaScript. Would you help how to run it? Yeah, sure. Share the link and we'll look into it. If it's too much work, then we are going to skip it. Otherwise, we'll look into it. Yeah, sure. Please go ahead. Do that. Awesome. So, what are your plans for this week? Do you have a lot of work in this week? Do you have not too much to do? Are you excited about the work? Do you want more holidays? Do you want the weekend to extend 5 days more? What is the sentiment here? Are you excited about the week or you just want to sleep more? Or just want to rest more rather? Excited to start the new week, Harry says. Awesome. That's super cool, man. Just give the idea like what steps are required to get it working. Hifza says, I have a lot of work, very busy week. Well, all the best, Hifza. Hope it goes well. Code, eat, sleep, loop. Code, eat, sleep, and repeat. Yes, Hasnan, exactly. All right, so how about we look at the code that or the repository that Adil has shared and see what it says. Uzair Khan says, I have did comments above, please check. Uzair, did I miss your comment? Let me check. How much we can make from making an API and sell it online in JS? Good question. We can have a look and I can share with you. So I'm pretty sure, or I'm not sure if you have seen my video on this or not. Have you seen my video on selling the API or no? If I'm right, I have a video above. So let's say you go to content, you go to sell So if you have not watched this video, maybe you should. So this is a video that exactly that, selling APIs or make money by building and selling APIs. So essentially, it depends on how much you want to earn. You can do the maths, right? So let's go to Excel draw and do some maths. So for example, if I wanted to go to here, and let's suppose you have got an API call, and then you have said that, hey, for each API I will charge you 0.00001 dollar, right? And then you have about, let's say you say you have about 1,000, or let's say 1,000 API calls per customer per month, right? And then you got about, just being a bit safe, so you have 30 customers, right? So 30 customers means you got 3,000 API calls, or 30,000, sorry, 30,000 API calls per month. And that would mean that you can then move it to 30,000, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which means that you're gonna have $1 a month in that case. So I can code for 24 hours, but when it comes to calculation, let's make sure we are right. So 0.00001 into 10, or into actually 1,000, and then you got into 30. So I might not be correct. But it's actually 30. So yeah, it's going to be 0.3, not $1. So $0.3 a month. If you've got 30 customers, then you can multiply it as much as you want. For example, if you got a 0.3 per month from 30 customers, let's say you got 100 customers. So if you got 100 customer instead of 30, so you're going to be multiplying it with let's see, 0.0001. Are there 4 zeros? Yes. And then you have 1,000, so it's 0.01. So 0.01 into 100 customers, and you get $1. So if you've got 100 customers, you can earn $1 a month. If you get 1,000 customers, then you get $10 a month. If you've got 10,000 customers, you get $100 per month, and so on. So it really depends on how you want to charge. So you could, when you go through this video teaches you how to even set up the plans that you want to use for selling the APIs, and then yeah, just use them. So I hope that makes sense. Working on a feature performance improvement task, Harry says. All right, that sounds exciting. Is it front end improvement or is it back end? I installed the libraries from project.json file using npm install. Hifza says just started learning JavaScript. That's awesome, Hifza. All the best. And if you find that something is unclear, you can always reach out to me on Discord, and that's codewithahsan.dev/discord. I'm sharing the link here as well. So you can always come and ask any questions on Discord. We have a lot of channels there that you can follow. Let me close the Discord here. And there you go. So you can basically do it there. Bro, if someone is using JS while Django project for front end, he should learn OOP of JS. Ali Mujahid. It depends on you. You should know OOP, and you should know JavaScript. And if you know OOP in JavaScript, then obviously you can write better code. So I would say yes. It doesn't really matter if you're working on backend or front end, but learning OOP with JS is always going to be a good thing to do. All right, so let's have a look at the link that Adil shared. So it's SEO ruler. This it's a public archive, and this is archived by the owner. So I'm not sure why even are you trying to work with it, but okay. So let's clone this. Let's open the terminal. And we're gonna go ahead and do this. So we got cd desktop experiments, git clone this, cd SEO ruler desktop app, and then we have, if I do ls, we have package JSON and package log.json. So you do npm install. So we can install the dependencies. Do they have a readme? Yes, they do. This is still in development and will not and not ready to be used. When ready, a release will be published. So that means that they're not really ready, to be honest. But the second thing that you can do is you can have a look at the package JSON and the scripts that you need to run. So mostly it's either the dev or the start script that we run to start the project. So let's see once this is installed. But they have archived it, so yeah, we'll see. We will see. All right, so I do code SEO or dot slash. Thank you, Ali. It doesn't have a start script. Yes, it doesn't. You can use the dev script because yeah, that's what actually is there. So let's open this guy. And here we can open a terminal here. Rather, I can close this guy here. So now you can run the dev script, which is this one. So you can run npm run dev, and that should run Vite in development mode. Then you also have build and build CI and test electron test client. So let's see. So it's running it on port 3344. So if I go there now, it actually opened this as well. So it ran the electron version of the app, as you can see. So maybe I don't really want to, or I don't really have to open it in the browser. I can just use the electron app. So this is the electron app running. It also has the DevTools open. I'm going to actually zoom in if it will allow me, otherwise I won't. So this is how it looks. So we got settings, dashboard, and the other things. Let's set project directory from this session. Set project directory. Okay. So what does it really want us to do? So if I go to desktop, to experiments, I can open, I believe this checks SEO or something. So I'm going to select this GHSS folder. So now it has, so you select some folder and then it says keywords, SERP, entities, utilities, content. So if I click keywords, what happens? Nothing happens so far. Okay, so this is the dashboard, which shows all of the keywords, entities, utilities, content. So you go to keywords and then you can add keywords or search keywords. Interesting. And you can load a CSV. I don't even know what's going to happen here, to be honest. So can I search something like Angular? No, I've already downloaded the packages. I did download the packages. They're already in Node module. So all of the packages are here. But there's some other packages that I need to install. I don't think so. SEO engines, bugs, blah, blah, blah. Debug env, blah, blah, blah. Dist, blah, blah, blah. The README really doesn't contain like the process itself. So app, client, dashboard, keywords. What does the keyword do? It gives text from data from Google search etc. Yeah, I'm checking the code now. So keyword list is there. This keyword list essentially takes the input. So this is just a presentational component. This one is the one. So we got on search keywords, use keywords, and then it essentially passes the keywords here, which makes sense. So this hook should contain the information of actually getting the data. So this hook has the atom keywords. What does the atom keywords do? From recoil. What does recoil do? So we got hooks, uh, entities, uh, setup tests, okay, wrapper, main, drag over, blah blah blah. It is a SEO tool, yes. But then if I'm doing a search here, it should actually search those things. But I don't see any, or maybe there are calls that I don't really see. So if I say JavaScript, hit enter, nothing really happens. Should I try it in the browser instead and see what happens there? So I go to the browser and let's see. So this is the browser. We select the project category, but I don't think this is going to be, yeah, this is not going to have the access to my file system because the browser doesn't allow it automatically. So the browser doesn't, I mean, yeah, on browser it wouldn't work. So you would have to run the Electron version because Electron has the capability to work with the file system. Page utilities, settings, clear project directory. Let's clear it. Let's select a project directory. We select this folder. We have entities on page. We go to keyboard, refresh this. Okay, so on refreshing clears, yeah, obviously because it's in development, so it doesn't save it. So you got to load CSV, save CSV. I think when you load the CSV of keywords, then you can, okay, CSV of keywords JavaScript. Keywords JavaScript. Uh, would they have an example of it? Let's see. Maybe they have a test CSV. So test unit, helper test. No, they don't have it. JavaScript Excel. No. Source, Excel access. Worksheets. Nope, these guys don't have it. So let's say sample. It should give a list of keywords related to a word you search. But I don't see any code that actually does that. So npm recoil. Let me first search what is recoil. Maybe it's doing some sort of, it's a state management library. But where do I don't see the code for retrieving the network calls. There is no network call. Do they use Axios? They're using Axios. Where are they using it? Test client. So test client is inside the test utils. So what do? They mock it, and that's pretty much it. Handle request from common error form, handle request from error, blah blah blah. I still don't see HTTP. Do they have an HTTP client? Nope. So basically you can load CSV, I think, and then you can just save it. I don't think you can search from Google. Let's see, example CSV keywords. Yeah. So there we go. We got a CSV here. So we can now load it. And it doesn't work. Load CSV, save CSV also doesn't work. So we got set here. We can set the project. We can go to keywords, click load CSV. Even this doesn't work. Are we on the right branch? Do they have more branches? View all branches, updated 2 months. No. No, I don't think it does anything so far. Discover, collect, track. But how did they then reach this set? Let me see. So this is the image that they got in the app types preload index.ts main handlers set project directory. That's pretty much it in here. With settings, once you have this, you check those things, you go inside there. Anyways, in the keywords, you have the page header, buttons bar, search input, keyword list, use keywords. So on search comes from use keywords. Use keywords come from here, from use keywords. This uses use recoil state. And then you have atom keyword. So it uses the state. But as soon as you search on change, search input on change, what does search input do? Oops. The search input is common component search. Common components search input. What does this do? So on change, it just runs on change, nothing else. Yeah, I don't see where the API call is done. So it just looks at the keywords and then, yeah. Do we have set keywords anywhere? Let's see. Set keywords. The set keywords is not even being used anywhere at all. Atom keywords. Atom keywords is also in the common atoms keywords. Yeah, I don't think this works at all. I don't see the API API calls at all. So maybe they have not pushed the code at all. Add to Chrome. It's a copy of this extension, or is it the exact extension? So in here, I can go and do this. So I can click this extension. No, which one was it? So here we got SU extractor. This is a completely different project. This is not related to that one because this is an extension. The developer is trying to copy this idea. Ah, okay, then that makes sense. Yeah, then it's not complete, and it's not there yet. Anyways, let's jump to the actual work that we wanted to do in that case. So yeah, it's trash. Alrighty, let's open this guy and remove this. So last time what we started doing was we had this level where we were able to create transactions and we were able to delete transactions. And here, for those of you who don't know how this app works or what this is a vanilla JavaScript OOP project or OOP budget application. And in this app, we are trying to create transactions. We have some wallets, and then we can manage our transactions and have a history of all of those. So for example, I could say that this is a test transaction, and I could go ahead and select, for example, $1,200. And since I've used Google Pay, if it's going to be debited, that means it's going to be subtracted from my wallet. So if I create this, you can see that the subtraction was done. And then you can see the minus 1200 here, which means that this was a debit transaction. So this is what we had so far. If I refresh, the state is still there, which means that this is persistent. So this stays inside my local storage. So if I go to applications and local storage, you can see that we got two things. We got wallets and we got transactions. And here you can see the exact transaction as that one. So test transaction, type debit, we have an ID, we have the amount and whatnot. Similarly, for the wallets, you will see that we got Google Pay, Apple Pay, and the exact amount. So like 3,800. And then we also have 2,000 for the Apple Pay. So having said that, in this video, we are going to implement the edit scenario. and that would essentially just make this whole form as an edit form. Okay, and then we are going to save it. So we're going to use the same form, but we are going to reuse the same form. We could either reuse the same form or we could create a new form. It's up to us. So what do you think? Should we go ahead and create a new form for editing, or should we reuse the same form? Let me know in the chat. So same form or a different form. Liked by Chophead. Same form because we are copycat army. Okay. So one of the things that I would want to do is also, you can see that we removed the minimum value from here, which we should put back again, because you should not be able to provide negative value. But I remember that if I go and do test 1 2 3 and if I hit create, it actually creates it. So it was a debit amount, but since we provided a negative value, it ended up adding it, which is weird. So I'm going to delete this, and now this should be back to 3830. So I'm going to say 3830, and there you go. So let's set a minimum value to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually close this project because I don't want to work on it. Then we got this. So this is ours. So in our form, we got this really nice input, which is number or the amount. And then here we can say the minimum value of this should be 1. And that's pretty much it. So now I shouldn't be able to decrease the value. So you can see that if I press the down arrow, I only get 1, and even the 0 should not be good. So if I go and do test 1 2 3 debit create, you can see it says value must be greater than or equal to 1. So it's the standard HTML validation that we have. So I have to put at least 1 here, and you can see that it reflects on the wallet and here as well, and I can delete, and then it gets reverted. Now this is funny because when I create the transaction, it actually transacted from Google Pay, but it returned it back on Apple Pay. That's weird. So let's say if I do test 1 2 3 and if I say 1, now it did it from here. Oh, because I changed it, and now I can go ahead. Oh, okay, I mistakenly clicked it. That's fine. So I can delete this and get it back. Cool. So now let's talk about edit. So we're going to use the same form, which means we would have to change some things. For example, this is going to be inside of new transaction, it's going to be edit transaction. Then we have the title, blah, blah, blah. And we have also this button. So the button text would also be changed, or we would say update in that case. But the rest of the things would be still the same, and this would be filled. So this is important. So now that we have the site verb form, let's talk about creating a function that changes the mode of this button of this form. So as you know, we only keep our DOM manipulation, or when we choose to change anything on the UI, the only place or the only class that we have that has those functions is the budget app UI. Everything else has just data and nothing else. So this is going to be the place where we are going to create a function that essentially changes the mode of the form. So we can call it set form mode, and we have only got 2 modes that we want to use. So here we would have form mode as a property, and then also we would have a set of form modes that we could use. So in this case, you can create some constants that I could use. So const form modes, and here I could go ahead and say one is new transaction, and I could say new in this case, and we could also have, we could say or actually we could say transaction form mode, transaction form modes, and here we could have new and edit. So we could say new edit. And this is because we don't want to use hard-coded string everywhere. We will rather just go ahead and select this. So in here, we are going to assign the form mode by default to form modes.new. And now when we assign a form mode, we are going to get the new mode here, and then we can use the mode right here. So here we could say something like this dot form mode equals transaction form modes, or actually not form mode, but directly the mode itself, right? And I'm going to rename this to transaction form mode in case we get more forms later on. So transaction form mode. Okay. I think a dropdown will look good for different payment methods like Google Pay, 3000. Yeah, we could also use the transaction. We could also use the select box here. Yep, we could do that. Yes. So when it comes to the UI, we are going to talk about it later because right now I want it to be very, very simple as much as possible. Usually it's also a good idea to see all of your wallets right away rather than having to click. So that's also one reason that I'm not putting it here. For example, if you look at the designs here or the design that we are trying to follow, you see all of the wallets here, right? So it's also nice to see the balance in all of them before, I mean, without having to click a drop down and then selecting one and then seeing that. So in terms of user experience, showing the wallet and their money is much better than, you know, having it a drop down in that case. So I'm going to keep it like that. So now that we have this form mode set, by default we have this set to transaction form modes new, and then we also have the capability of having this mode change. Now in here we are going to check if this dot transaction form mode equals to transaction form modes dot new, then we would have the code for new transaction, which means that we are going to just set the form to null, and we already have the entry form here that we have. So entry form or transaction form, you could call it whatever you like. I'm going to rename this to transaction form. So we have transaction form here, and I could do simply this dot transaction form dot reset when we are setting the form or resetting the form. If that's not the case, then we can, or we could also do a switch in this case rather than if. So we could do something like transaction, this dot transaction form mode, and then case, and then we can say transaction form new. If that's the case, then we have something, and which is this exactly. And then the second case is transaction form modes dot edit, in which case we have this situation. So I'm going to remove this, if else. So this is how it looks, and here I can say code for edit transaction, right? So we got this. Now let's say someone clicks this button edit, and when that happens, I want to go ahead and I want to put all of the information in this form. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set the edit form, and I'm going to first get the transaction of the element, which and this is a bit tricky. So this form mode would have to see which button was clicked. For example, in the case of edit, what we want to do is we want to be able to set the form details with the transaction value. So if I hit edit, then this title, category, debit, amount, all of this should be filled automatically to the form. So in this case, I would have two things, mode and then also transaction, for example, right? And this transaction by default is going to be null. So in this case, if I have set form mode to edit, then what I want to do is I want to do set something like set transaction or set transaction form values, and here I want to put the transaction here or pass the transaction. So let's create this function set transaction form values. this only receives a transaction, and what we are going to do is just console log that transaction for now. Baby steps, transactions. So now let's call this function when we press the edit button. So as you remember, we have this transaction action function already. We already have a case for the delete one. So we already do the delete transaction with the transaction element and the transaction ID. What I could also do is rather get the transaction in that case as well, because I see that the code is being duplicated, but let me think. Uh-huh. The only problem I see here is that these functions are not pure, because we are using a lot of things from outside, which requires some code refactoring if I wanted to do it. But then I also want to keep everything very simple and not too complicated. So what do we do in that case? Let me think. So in order for delete transaction to be pure, I would want to have the transactions array. I would also want the transaction storage, the wallet and wallet storage. And then also the render wallet. Now this is also an interesting thing. Now I'm just going to keep it simple. So we got the delete transaction. I'm going to actually copy this, go to delete transaction where it is called, and here we're going to use this dot edit transaction. We're going to pass the same thing, transaction element and transaction ID. And then let's create this function. So we say something like edit transaction. This is going to receive the element and the ID. And then here we have the code. So we are going to get the transaction to edit in this case by comparing with the ID. Then what we'll do is we are going to set the form value, and that's it. So we are going to say this dot transaction, or we have set form mode, and we are going to set to transaction form modes dot edit, and then the transaction is going to be passed right here. So we have the transaction to edit. This is what we are going to pass. Okay. So when we do this, it's going to go to the form mode, set the form mode, and then it goes ahead to go to set transaction form values with the transaction, and that logs the transaction. So let's try this out. I'm going to go and open the debugger. And in this case, if I go to sources and go to edit transaction, I'm just going to put a breakpoint here. So if I click this button, which we have not done yet, so nothing happens, or actually happens because we put the link here. Okay, I forgot about that. So when we click the edit button, it goes into the right else condition, and then it goes ahead and it sees the edit transaction function and passes the transaction element, which is this, and the transaction ID. So it goes inside, then it tries to find the transaction to edit. If I hit play, it finds the transaction to edit, which is this one. Then it passes the edit mode and then the transaction to edit, both in the function set form mode. It goes ahead, sets the transaction form mode to edit. Previously it was new, now it's edit. Then it goes ahead and goes to set transaction form values, and here in transaction. So that's where we are right now. So if I go to transaction, looks like I missed something. And I missed the edit transaction function, which is actually this. So here it should be this dot transaction form values and not just the function. So this is a property, or a method, so we had to use that correctly. So hit play, let's click edit again. It goes inside, goes to set form mode, goes here, and now it can find the function. So it passes this without the errors, and here the transaction is being passed, so it will be logged right here. So as you can see, we got the transaction. Now we need to set the form. So how do we set the form inside? So we already have the transaction form that we can get. So we can say this dot transaction form dot, or we can take the elements out. So we can do something like const. Let me think actually. So we can take the elements out and we can go ahead and get it from the transaction form. And I think now we can do elements. And here I could say something like, let's say title equal transaction dot title. So let's just try this. So when I refresh this and I click edit, we go there, actually here, then we go inside, we go to start transaction, we come here, log the transaction, then from the form we get the elements out, as you can see. And in the elements we have all these things like amount, title, and whatnot. So I can say elements title equals to transaction title. I should rather be saying elements title dot value transaction dot title. So actually let me do this. So if I do transaction this dot transaction form dot, and if I say something like title, it's an input, and then here I can say value, and you can see it's empty. So I can rather do dot elements title dot value, which is empty, and if I set this to something like blah and hit enter, you can see that it sets it right there. So that's what we want to do. So I'm going to go and do elements title dot value equals to transaction dot title, and then we have the other values to set as well. So we get the amount to amount. We also had the category to category. Then we also had the, let me actually think. So for each transaction, what do we have? So if I play this guy, I would still see transaction or no. Wait a second. So we said category, and we also should look at here. So we got category, title, date, and amount. So we got date and amount that we want to use here. Okay. Okay, we don't need to set date because we calculated randomly, but we also have the amount then, and then the type. So we have category, title, amount, and type. Okay, got you. So category, amount, title, and then we also have type, and then we set it here, type. Okay. Now the category that we usually have within our application or in the storage also contains a couple of other things that we don't want, like the icon classes. So we only want to use the value of the category. So here it should be category dot value. So it sets the right value. So now let's try this. I'm going to refresh this guy, hit edit, go here, and then to the function. Now you can see that when we get the elements, we can get the transaction title, which is test transaction. The value of the input right now is nothing, so it's going to set it right now, as you can see. So the test transaction came here. Then we have the amount set to minus 1200. We need to reverse it and then assign the value, because right now it should not be minus 1200, it should be 1200, but it's set to minus 1200, so we got to fix that. Then we got the category dot value. So the category dot value is restaurants and cafe. Right now it's selected restaurant and cafe as well, so it's going to set it anyways. And then the type is debit, and the type here is debit as well. So I'm going to do that as well. Now let's fix two things. One, we need to negate the amount. So we got to do it a -1 here because we want it to be negated, whatever that is. So let's change these two things so we can see this actually working. So if I hit this, it goes ahead, goes ahead, goes ahead here. And now it's going to go set the title. Now it's going to set the value. So the amount is minus 1200, but it's going to set 1200, which is what we wanted. Then the category value here, as you can see, is the transaction category value. One more thing that we could do is we could just use a positive value everywhere and just show this type based on the type, credit and debit. That would make things so easy for us, because right now we have to multiply by -1 into multiple places, which I don't think is the best way to do. So we are going to probably change that in a bit. But the category is credit and loans. But if I set it from transaction, you can see it changes to restaurant cafe. And the type of the transaction was debit. But in here, it is credit. So when we change it, you can also see this changing. Boom, there we go. So we are able to set the amount correctly. Did we miss something? I don't think so. And finally, what I also want to do is to change the title, or have, let me see actually. So in here, what I want to do, if I click edit, goes here, goes actually here. And in this case, what I want to do is the transaction form has this button, entry submit button, right? So I want to get this entry submit button. Does the element also have it? I think yes. So it has this entry submit button, and I need to change the text of it to update. So I can say something like elements, and here I can say entry button dot value, or actually dot text content. And here I could call this update. And now if I do this, let's see what happens. So here it says create. If I hit edit, then it broke. So we have a problem here. So if I hit edit again, remove this from here and go here, and then here we got the elements dot entry submit button. It's not entry button. So entry submit button. And here, if I hit edit, it goes here. The text content there is create, but now we are changing it to update, and you can see that this updates as well. So we are using JavaScript to update values of a form element, and using the elements interface or elements object there, right? So now that we have this done, should we get rid of the -1? Let me see how many places we are using this. So we're only using this at 2 places. So let's actually remove it. We are not going to use -1 here, and we are going to not use the -1 here as well. We're going to see when we have to update the amount, if we want to add or remove at certain places, or what do we show. Because right now, if I refresh, or I would have to clear my application in order to see this. So if I remove everything and refresh, you can see that we have a fresh start. And now I can say test transaction. Let's pick credit and loans, make it a debit, say 1200, take it out. And in this case, if I go forward, you can see that we still got the -1200 in this case. And if I go to my network tab, or actually my application here, if I refresh and see the transaction, the amount is -1200. So how are we getting this minus? Let's actually see that. So if I talk about a new transaction, this is the new transaction. The amount that we get is applied directly, which makes sense. Am I using multiply anywhere? Let's see. No, we are not. So then how did this become this? So let's refresh. Let's say test 1, 2, 3, close, credit, or actually debit 1200, and then hit create. So it goes towards the all of those things. So in here, oh, so we are making it here. Okay. So we are making it here in the amount value. That doesn't make sense, because then we shouldn't be doing it there. The amount should still be positive, but whether to add or subtract should be the choice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check this amount value, and I'm going to remove it from here. And this amount would go directly in as it is. And when we create transaction, then the amount would still be there as and then the type is there. Now, when we do create transaction, and afterwards, when we have to update the amount, here we can provide the amount that has to be added or removed, right? So we are providing an update here, and we should have an update method. So in here, we got this update method of the wallet. When we want to put or update the value, what we should do is we should provide the amount, the is primary, and the type in this case, and then we can decide if we want to add it or remove it. So in this case, we should also be providing the type. So let's update this. And I'm not sure if I'm using update amount anywhere. No, I'm not using it. So I'm going to remove this. And now here, I'm going to check what is the type. If the type is credit, then we do this dot amount plus equals to, or we could also check this or do it in one line. So we could do something like this. So let's actually do this. So if the amount is undefined, so if the amount is undefined, we don't do anything, or actually not undefined, then we check if the type is credit, then from the wallet we add it. So this dot amount plus equals to amount, or we can say amount. We're always assuming that this is a positive value, and else if it's debit, then this dot amount minus equals amount, and that's it, right? And this is to make sure that amount is not undefined. So if I go and do this, remove this, I think we should be good. Firas says, bro, I'm an idiot. Stack in JS. I don't know, should I learn DOM or algorithm or problem solving? I would suggest to do one thing at a time, Firas. You can probably learn DOM manipulation first. I would suggest looking at DOM manipulation because I think it's the easiest one that you can pick. So now that we have the update function fixed, it's time to try things out. So I'm going to refresh now. Let's say we want to add a transaction, test transaction, and I want to go ahead and say something like credit and loans, make it debit, say 1200. That should mean that the value is going to be still 1200, but we are going to show the negative and positive in a different manner. So here the amount goes like this, as you can see, 1200. If I save this, this is going to go into the, you can see the wallet actually deducted this, which is good. Now the value here is 1200, so I should show minus there. So I'm gonna do that, but I also want to make sure that in my local storage, the transactions value is still positive. The amount is 1200, as you can see, but we should be converting it into a number, which we did not do. So let's actually do that. So when we create a transaction, create transaction here, we should be going into the transaction and making it a number of amount. So that's what we should do. So I'm gonna answer your question in just a bit. So test 1 2 3 1200 created. So we go ahead and do everything as before. And if we go into the local storage now in the transaction, we have 1200, which is not a string anymore. Why your VS Code is beautiful? Can you tell me why? What's the extension you use? Yes, sure. So this theme that I'm using, it's called Winter is Coming. So the color theme is Winter is Coming. So you can find Winter is Coming by John Papa, and you're going to find this. And the font that I use is called Fira Code. So if I go to, I think I will probably go to the same thing. So settings, text editor, font. Yeah, it's Fira Code. It's open source and available on GitHub. So you can definitely find it out. I actually love this font and I've never changed after switching to this. So yes, that's the answer. So instead of 1200, how do we show minus 1200? So we're going to go into our index.html And in here, or sorry, not index.html, but rather in the render function or in the getHTML function of a transaction class. So if I go to transaction and the getHTML, here you can see that we have this amount. So right beside the amount, we can decide if we want to show negative or positive, because this is just a value we want to show to the end user. So in here, I would say this dot type. If this dot type is credit, for example. So here I could say something like, if it's credit, if it's credit, then use nothing, otherwise use a minus in this case, and then the amount. So let's try this out. So I'm going to remove everything, refresh, test, 1 2 3, created, and now it only shows us minus, and we also have some other issues as well because we introduced a new keyword here. Now that I see it, I mean, I'm thinking to start, we shouldn't even use transaction template and we should rather use just a function. This is weird. All right. And then we got wallet item template and then transaction item template. So in here, now I would have to see where because this is becoming more complex than I thought. I wonder how style components work in this way. Do they use something like, do they use not positional arguments, or how do they go? Because that's what I'm interested in now. Anyways, so we got this guy here, which is coming right before the amount, which is the last one. So I'm going to go to the transaction item template, and in here we have the amount, but right before amount, I'm going to say type because we are using type here. So I'm going to go ahead and use type just before the amount, and this is going to be string 6. So we also need another string here. By the way, this is the tagged template feature in JavaScript that I'm using, which I now find very irritating actually. So we got the amount, but just before the amount, we are going to use type. Then we're going to use, this is irritating. So we got type, then we should have a string 5, then we should amount, and then we should have a string 6. So now we got everything correctly. I'm going to refresh now, delete this guy, refresh, remove everything, and now let's see. So if I say test 1 2 3, 1 2 3, and hit create, you can see that it says -1 2 3, which is what we wanted, and everything looks good. Now we have one problem. You will notice that when I did a delete, it did not really reflect it back. So I'm going to select this, and if I hit delete, you can see that it did not deduct, or it did not bring it back, rather it deducted more value. So we also need to look into the delete function to make sure that the amount that we want to delete is being returned correctly. So we are going to go to delete transaction. Inside here, we're going to make sure that the transaction to remove amount is correct. So in here, we are providing the amount here, but we also want to provide the type as we discussed. So I'm going to provide the type here. So the type is transaction to remove.type, and then it should update the amount correctly. So if I go and do test and 1 2 3, created, you can see a -1 2 3. This became 4877. If I delete this, it should become 5000 again, which it didn't still. So we got some problem there. So let's see what we are missing there. So I'm looking at the question first. Okay, open a good playlist on Spotify. In background, it's going to be a long night watching you. I need to learn. Okay, I think you can open Spotify. I don't listen to music anymore. So yes, you can go ahead. I have a question though. Do you believe that there are big apps that only use JavaScript, HTML, CSS as front end and not using built-in frameworks? I don't think so, Amir Ben. But I do want to look into the DOM APIs, whatever is working behind the scenes, because otherwise you wouldn't know. And if there is something that you want to do out of the box from the frameworks, then you would be pulling your hair because you wouldn't know the underlying technology. And I like to also know what is underlying the system. So yes, this refers to the function name or the last variable used. This always refers to, in our case, refers to the class. So when we say this dot render transaction, that means class dot or the instance of the class and that function. So we were talking about the delete transaction. Let's actually look into what happened really. So I'm going to remove this, start fresh, test, 1, 2, 3, hit create. And now I'm going to go to sources and go to delete transaction. And let's see what really happens here. So I'm going to remove all of the breakpoints. Click here and here. So if I click delete, transaction to remove is there. Then all the transactions are there. So transaction to remove is this one. It has the amount 1 to 3, type debit. So it goes ahead and saves the transactions, which is good. Then it updates the wallet with the transaction. So it is the amount 123 and the type, which is debit. So if I go, oh, okay. The problem in here is that we are doing a reverse transaction. So this will not work. This will not work because we have written that if it's debit, then we need to add it or minus it. So we don't need, so we then should just provide the final amount, which means not the type as well. Interesting. All right, let's fix that. So in here, I'm going to just do the calculation here. So we're going to say if, or actually we could say something like remove the type, but in here I can say transaction to remove dot type equals to, if it's credit, then we negate it. So if it was credited, then it was added to the system. So we need to provide a minus value here. So we can say minus number amount. And then here the amount, where is the amount? Oh, sorry. We need to take out the amount and the type here. So const amount, amount type equals transaction to remove, because I don't want to use transaction to remove like everywhere. So the amount here is going to be this, and then we also got the type. So we are checking, hey, if the type is credit, then you do a negative value, otherwise, or actually we can say minus amount because it's a number value already. And then we got, otherwise we got amount, right? If it's debit, then we return it back. So it's going to be a positive value. I'm going to remove this from here. I'm going to go to the update function. And then, yeah, here. So I'm going to remove this here. We are always going to add the amount in that case. So this dot amount is plus equals to the amount that we're providing. We don't need a type here anymore. And let's see. So if we update this, we're providing the transaction dot amount here. And this is when we create the transaction. So in here also, we are going to identify if the amount needs to be positive or negative. So in here, we're going to just do this. So the amount here that we're trying to provide, we're going to check if the type is credit. If it's credited, then it's a positive value, or the amount is a positive value, right? Else is a negative value of the amount. So let's test this out. So if it's debited, we provide a negative value. Otherwise, we provide a positive value like this. Amir Ben says, true story. The more you code lower level, the more you know what's happening. Exactly, yes. Otherwise, we're going to be limited. So let's say we say something like test, or actually let's start with a clean slate. So we say test 1, 2, 3, hit create, or actually let's refresh, test 1, 2, 3, and we hit create. So now we got a 1, 2, 3 negative value, which is good because it was a debit transaction. And we got 4877, which makes sense. Now, if I go to sources and if I hit delete again, you can see that if I go forward and go to amount type, Can I please get rid of this? Yes. So in this case, it's going to come here, here, and now we're checking, hey, what is the type? The type was debit. So this was a negative value. So what is going to happen is we are going to go ahead and just provide the positive values to add it back. And when we do, we're going to get 5,000 again. Yay, awesome. So our credit and transaction, or our credit and debited value from creating and deleting have been fixed. Now let's talk about the edit scenario. So when we create a test 1 to 3 created, this is a debit transaction. I can change these to this. And now if I hit edit, you can see that this fills our input because we coded it already. Now this says update. This text should also say that this is edit transaction. So what I'm going to do is we get this h4, which is sort of sidebar heading. So I can give this a class of sidebar heading so we can access this. So in here, when we are doing the form change, which is around transaction form values, here the set form mode. So in here, I could go ahead and say something like const heading, or I could also just get the heading here, const heading document dot get element by ID, or actually we could do something like query selector, and this is sidebar heading. So what I'm going to do here is that if the heading element, if this is a new, then we say heading element dot text content equals new transaction. Otherwise, we set it to edit transaction. So which means that now if I hit edit, you can see this says edit transaction, and we have all of these things. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to introduce a button that would also be called cancel. So I can basically do this. Is it this? Yeah. So the ID here, it would be entry cancel button, and here I could say cancel. By default, this is going to be hidden. So if I refresh this, you can see that you can actually not see it because the button doesn't exist, or the button is not shown, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this display block or null, or remove the attribute hidden to show it or hide it. So in this case, when this is a new transaction, we first set the heading, then we reset the form, and then we also should go ahead and get the element, or get the cancel button. So we can say cancel transaction cancel button element, and then this should be the entry cancel button. So this would be this guy. And then what we do here is we basically say cancel button dot set attribute, or remove attribute hidden, or actually add attribute. Is it set attribute? Set attribute hidden to true. Do you use React and Next.js, Firas? Yes, I do. My own site is actually built with Next and React. Remove attribute hidden. So if you go to CodeWithAhsan.dev, which has some amazing blog posts, which also have the, oh, this is interesting. I actually don't see my, no, this is not interesting because it should be here. So all of my blogs are here. All of the courses are here as well. This is built with Next.js. And this is, a lot of this is custom built. For example, this whole module of the courses is actually self-built. So I built it from scratch. And the courses layout as well. I think we did it on live stream. So let's go back. So in here, if I click edit, this cancel button should come here, as you can see. Yay! And then also if I go back to somehow the new case, then also it should go. So what I'm going to do is that instead of having this cancel afterwards, I'm going to keep it here before. So it looks a bit better. So here, cancel, update, and if I hit cancel, it should it should actually go back. And I got 2 transactions now because I am stupid and I forgot one thing. If you have 2 buttons within the form, it doesn't really matter which button you fill. And this is a React, no, this is a JavaScript quirk that if you have 2 buttons within a form and you click any of them, the form would submit, because this is what happened. If I go to submit and show you, if I hit create or actually edit and hit cancel, the submit function still triggers. And that is because we have not defined what kind of button is this, or which is the submit button. So it considers every button as the submit button. So we need to define the type equals submit to the create button and the type equals button to the other one. Otherwise, it would still remain an issue. So I'm going to go to application, clear this out, refresh the page, test 1, 2, 3, create, and now I can edit it. And now my breakpoints should still be there. I'm going to turn on the breakpoint. And now if I cancel, you can see that nothing works or it doesn't happen because the type of this is button. But if I hit update, then the submit would trigger. So if I hit update, you can see that it works because the type is submit and the other one is button. So I hope that makes sense. So now I'm gonna quickly go ahead, remove this, and let's talk about the edit feature. So if I do edit, the transaction is done. I also want to have a cancel button feature here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the init handlers, the init. You could use event.stop propagate on the cancel button. Why would I want that, Amir? I don't have any issues with propagation. I could use the propagation to stop it, maybe, yes, but I don't think that's the right way to do it, because you should be defining, because otherwise I would have to do it on every single button. So if I add more buttons here for any reason, for quantities, for example, then I would have to do it for everyone. So rather, the right approach is to tell what kind of button is this, rather than preventing things. But yes, that could work. That could work, yes. Yes. So let's talk about the cancel function or cancel button. So in here, if I go to submit, you will see that we got this add event listener to the submit. And what I want to do is also to have this this button, which is cancel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to query this up top here. So const. I could actually have the cancel button within this class because I have other elements as well. So why not have the cancel button? Because I want to do 2 things there. Let me think actually, because I'm using it in multiple places. So let's actually do this. So we could say cancel entry or entry cancel button. And we are going to call this here, so we can quickly go ahead and do this. So we do end, and I'm actually very curious because my camera is still working, although it seems like it has run out of battery, but yay. Anyways, so we're gonna say document dot query selector. Here we got this guy. We go ahead and say entry cancel button. We get this button, and then we got this. Now everywhere where we're using the cancel button, we can rather use this dot blah blah blah. So we don't need this cancel button here, which means that we can go ahead and say this dot entry cancel button dot set attribute, and then this dot entry cancel button dot remove attribute. Now that we have this, let's go ahead and go to init handlers, and here we're going to add another handler. So we're going to say this dot entry cancel button dot add event listener. Click when this clicks, and now my camera is dead. Yay. And it's also nice that I can see it before it actually dies on OBS. So it still shows the data because here, I mean, on the camera's screen, it stops showing that, but on OBS, it still shows. So it's still streaming, but it's that on the camera. So that's nice because I can then quickly swap it. Not as quick though. So here we got the add event listener. Now this should do a set form mode to new or transaction form modes dot. And the camera is dead. Yay. Exactly. So here we got the set form mode to new, and that should reset everything. So now if I go and hit edit, you can see the values being put here, but if I hit cancel, yay, awesome. So we got everything resetted. So I think this is what we wanted, right? So we set gift cards, for example, credit, and hit cancel. It becomes new transaction. Everything is set to the what it was before. But one thing that is not set is this guy still says update. So we don't want that. So let's see where we set this. So when we go to here, we set the elements transaction entry submit button. Okay. I'm thinking how to do it the best way possible. Okay, let's do it this way. Let's optimize this a bit. So we're going to take the elements out here since we need them to do one thing. Then we'll pass the elements here in the transaction. So elements and then the transaction. So I remove the elements line from here. So we have elements and transaction both here. I'm going to remove that as well. And now when we are using set transaction form values, let's also pass elements there. Now this allows me actually to use the elements API to access the submit button and then set values there. So I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to set the heading and the submit button values here. So I can say elements, entry submit button text content to create in the case of new. And then here I can do the update. So now if I hit edit, you can see that it says update. If I do cancel, it goes back to create. Awesome. So there we go. Now, the only thing that's remaining for the edit is when I update, I want to actually do update. I don't want to do create in that case, right? So right now, if I go to event handlers, go here, you will see that here we create transaction and then we do a lot of magic and then we update the wallet and then we do a lot of things here. So what I would want to do in this case is actually to I'm trying to see how can we make sure that the wallet is updated as well. For example, if I have a transaction that I'm trying to understand. Let's say we got a transaction that was minus 1200 and the wallet that we have had 5000 and that now became 3800. Now if I want to edit this and I want to say no, this was 1800, then this would have to also update that. So instead of 3800, that would have to be 3200, which means that whatever I change here, I would then have to know which wallet to put back the value or the difference per se, right? So this is what I gotta do in that case. And the only challenge or one challenge in that case would also be that if I do the main transaction using Google Play, but I edit it via Apple Pay, then that would also be a problem because then if I do it instead of 123, if I do it, for example, I make it 246, that means that there's also an additional 123 that has to be debited from my Apple Pay, right? And then I would have to adjust it. So now that's where the complex things come in. So what do we do in that case? Let's see. So I want to reuse the code, of course. And I also want to be able to, let's see what the create transaction does. It creates a new transaction, it gets the HTML, and then it does all of this. That makes sense. So in that case, when we do, okay, so we either, so here obviously we would have to have a use case on, what kind of mode is that. So we could say something like switch this dot form transaction from mode. And then we got this guy, which is transaction form modes dot new, in which case this would still work, right? And we can create a transaction here, let transaction, and then transaction becomes this guy. So now the code would still work. Then we also got a case where transaction forms dot edit would be used, and then we would have to use the other logic here. So when we edit this, we're going to reset the form. Still, we're going to go ahead and then we also set the category value to the category. Then we also update the value with adding the value. Then we have to set all the wallets, render the current wallet, transactions dot push transaction, and then save to storage. So I believe this guy and all of these would actually go inside the new transaction in this case. Does that make sense? I think it does. So we reset the form, we reset the value to the category of the transaction, and then we update the wallet by adding it, and then we got the transactions push transaction. Now the fun part of editing is that we would have to have the difference of the form itself, so we can adjust the wallet in that case. And that is what is the interesting part. So what we are going to do is we're going to get the transaction in this case. Do we use transaction anywhere else? I think we just use it here. So then the transaction is not being used here. So I can actually move this from here and then make const transaction here. Now for the case of edit, what we would want to do is we're going to call a new function called edit transaction or update transaction. And then we pass these things there, the amount, category, title, and type, right? Then we would also have to find the ID of the transaction as well. In the case of update transaction, and then we update it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be right back in about 5-ish minutes, and then we are going to continue this. I need to go for the nature's call. So I'm going to be right back. All right, we are back at it. So where were we? All right. So we did create the update transaction function. We need to pass all of those things here. Then what we want to do is to be able to find the transaction to update and to update it. So we can do something like this: const. Um, should we? Wait a second. Yeah, we could do this. So we could go ahead and say const transaction or transaction index equals this dot transaction. Thank you, Firas. This dot app dot transactions dot find, and then we find it via tr dot id equals id. So we find it by id. Then we do this. So we say something like this dot app spongefard. Hello, what an amazing name. Dot transactions transaction index equals, and here we can say this dot. Actually, let me think about it, because what we want to do is we want to be able to update all of that within the transaction, and we also want the to be able to just update it so that it also contains the functions that we need for the transaction. So we should have just the update function within the transaction so we can update it. I don't think we have that. No, we don't. So let's create a function update, and here we're going to receive the category, the title. We won't update the date. We will update the type and the amount, and that is it. So here we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna say this dot category equals category, this dot category. Similarly, we are going to do it for the other ones. So we got the was it type, and then we got this guy. So we got this. Actually, how do I get out of it? Yeah, double escape. So then we got this guy. This is type, and then category, and then amount, and then we got this guy, which is title. What are you making, Spongefart? What we are doing is we are working on this transactions application with pure JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, and we are going to have it in the end with something like this. So right now it looks like this, but it's completely working. And we are working with an OOP based or object oriented programming based transactions application right here. So what I want to do is, once we find the transaction to update or to edit, we set this, and then also there was this. So when we have this here, we are calling the update transaction function, right? And here we got transaction index. So instead of that, we could find the transaction to update, and then here we can say something like tr to update dot update. So we already should have a function called update here, and then we pass all of these things. We pass the title, the amount, the category, and the type, and that should do it. So once we have that done and updated the transaction, we would also have to take out the amount difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna first take the difference, const difference equals, or actually let's do that later. So now that I have this, after the update transaction, what we would want to do is we would also want to update the wallet, right? Then the rest of the things are, I think, exactly the same. So if the mode is edit, then we update the wallet, right? And we're going to update it in a different manner in this case. Then we would also want the form to change back to the add form. So we are going to go ahead and say this dot set form mode
to transaction form modes dot new, and that's it. Okay. So yeah, let's try this out now. So we're going to go ahead and do it from scratch with numbers that are easier to understand. So in this case, I'm going to remove everything, refresh now, and now let's create a transaction worth $1,000. So we can say transaction 1. Let's make it a credits and loan, type debit, and we have $1,000 transaction from Google Pay. So if I do this, you're going to see that this became 4,000 and this is a minus 1,000 transaction, right? Now, what I want to do is I want to be able to edit this. So if I edit this, you can see that this became edit transaction, transaction 1, credit and loans, and debit, and then 1,000, right? So if I go now here to update transaction, I believe there's just one usage because we have not really used it. So we're going to go to here, transaction form edit, and here we first want to do this dot update transaction with the title, amount, type, and category. And once the transaction is updated, then we want to update the wallet and set form mode, blah, blah, blah. So we edit this, then we open this and we go to update transaction here and then here. So now if I go and click update, you can see that our function or the submit of this form gets triggered. Then it takes out the title, the amount, 1,000, the category, and the type, all of that here. And then it goes all the way here to provide this to update the transaction. So I go inside here, and then you can see that we get the ID, or actually we don't get the ID because we are not really passing it. So this is undefined, so our project would, or our function wouldn't work because there's no transaction to update. So let's actually provide the ID here as well. So we got the ID, and the ID is not here, which is actually something that we want. So how do we get the ID when we are submitting a form? That's going to be interesting because we don't have it here. So for edit, we're going to have to find the closest element that contains the ID. So let's do that. And I'm going to see if I can find it really quick because I already have that somewhere in this code. So when we handle transaction, we actually do that. We get the event and then we get the closest transaction element, and then we get the ID. But I think a better way would be when we click edit on a particular transaction, right? We should actually save it somewhere so we can get access to it. So here we could say something like transaction to edit, and here we can get it, right? So when we go to our set form mode and we go and say, hey, we are setting the transaction form values to blah, 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 then this transaction itself should be there. So when we do edit transaction, we already have transaction to edit. We should be setting it here. This dot transaction to edit equals transaction to edit, right? Then we don't need to pass it because then when we can get it automatically. So I can go and remove this. And now in the edit case, I can pass the transaction here, this dot transaction to edit. So it goes to the form values with the transaction and sets all of those things. So this is fine. Now, when I have submitted the form with the init event handlers with here, I would already have the editing transaction here. So I can actually pass rather the transaction to edit. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to update the transaction with the ID, title, amount, and type from the form, or actually title, type, amount, and category, but the ID would be this dot transaction to edit dot ID. So I can get the ID from the active transaction, and then we do this. Once everything is done, I should also reset it. So we can say this dot transaction to edit equals null after it has been edited. And when we change the form mode, it should also set this to null as well. But actually this shouldn't be here. We have the set form mode here. So when it is done or it is being set to new, then we also reset it to null, right? I think we're good there. Cool. So now if I try this again, let's see what happens. So we have 4,000 here, 1,000 here, or minus 1,000 here. We hit edit, we hit update. So it now comes within the function, and now it has the ID, of course. Now it's going to find the transaction to update, which actually is the transaction to edit. So I don't really need to find it now that I think about it. So let's see. So transaction to edit is this one. We go to edit transaction. So transaction to edit was this one. Then we go to update transaction. Actually, let's keep it this way. So we find the transaction to update with the transactions, but then I already have that, so I shouldn't be actually doing it. So I can remove this, and I can remove the ID, and I can use the update transaction function without the ID. And then I can go and rename this to update selected transaction. And then we can say this dot transaction to edit dot update. And then we are passing the title, amount, category, and type. I think that makes sense. Once we have done that, we then have to do a couple of things. So that would be updating the wallet that we want. Then the question is, I shouldn't even be having this because this function does nothing. So I can actually remove this, and I could just put it here. So this dot transaction to edit dot update, we update that transaction, right? Then we have this amount that we just got, and then it goes somewhere. So it does something, but let's check it out what it does really. So if I refresh now, go and edit this, I will say that this is still 1,000. So I'm not really changing anything. But if I hit update here, let's see what happens. You can see that the transaction is still the same, but we got another 1,000 deduction from our wallet. And that is the problem, because the code that we have written here, it actually deducts the same amount again from the wallet. And this is not what we wanted. If there was a difference in the amount, then we do that. Otherwise we don't, right? And that is what we actually have to see. So in this case, we are going to find out the difference before. So we can say const original amount equals transaction to edit dot amount. And then we should have a different amount, which is this one. And we can say something like diff or amount diff equals original amount minus, or we could also say previous amount rather, previous amount minus the amount that we've got now. And this amount is actually not a number in the case of edit. So we got to convert that. So we can say number amount. And now that we've got the amount difference, that is what we need to use here. So amount difference and amount difference. And now let me show you if it works correctly or not. So I'm going to refresh now and remake the same instances. In this case, the amount that we are looking at is 3,000, and this is 1,000 still. And it's a debit one. So if I go ahead and hit update, you can see that it did not change anything, and that is what we wanted. So let's try this again. I'm going to go ahead and hit edit. And now let's put a update transaction, which is here, here, and here. So this is the transaction edit case, or actually here. So if I hit update, Actually, I've hit edit, and this is called update. So if I hit update, you can see that the previous amount was 1,000. The current amount that we have is also 1,000, but it's a string, so we convert it into a number. So the difference essentially comes 0. Now, if I update the transaction to edit, which is 1,000, it is still going to be the same transaction to edit, right? Now, if I update the wallet, it's going to update with the amount difference, which is exactly 0. So we don't do anything, right? And then we set the form mode to new, which will reset this form. The transaction to edit becomes null, and easy peasy. Now, one thing that that we would have to understand is, actually I don't need this line because the set form mode already sets it, so I don't need that. One thing that we have to understand is, let's say this transaction was not 1,000 but rather 1,500, or not 1,500 but 500. That would mean that my wallet should get back 500, so this would be 3,500 in that case. So if I edit this and change this to 500, then update, then you can see that the previous amount was 1,000. The difference now should be 500, right? Because the current amount is 500. So we got the difference in that case. Then we update the transactions. Right now it's 1,000. But if I go forward, now this becomes a 500, which is good. And if we go further down the road, you will see that the wallet that we are trying to update is going to get an amount difference. So the wallet should be 3,500, but it would be rendered afterwards. So it is going to set this, set the current app wallet, and that's where it should actually have become 3,500, but it seems like we did a mistake. Oh, because yes, we're deducting it further. So we shouldn't have deducted, we should have added it. So in here, if it's debit, then it should be a positive value. So we get it back, otherwise we credit it or negate it. So let's do this exercise once again. I'm gonna do a complete swap of this. We say test 1, 2, 3, create. Now, or actually, let's do this again. Let's use a value that is much most readable. So 1,000. In 1,000, this 5,000 becomes 4,000, which is okay. Now, if I go to edit this and make it 500 instead, then that would mean that if I go to my sources and hit update, now it's going to go to the previous amount diff, blah, blah, blah. And the type was debit. So this 1,000 would become 500, and then I'll get back my 500 into my wallet. So here you can see that I got back my wallet value, and this should have been updated, which it did not. However, if I refresh the page, you can see that this looks good, right? The only thing that I can see actually is the category. The category got messed up because if I go to my application and see the category, this is actually the value of the category and not the entire category object, which is what happens when you create it. So if I create test and if I create like 1, 2, the category is actually an object. So we need the entire object. We rather chose the category value from the input. So we want that. So how do we go about doing that? In the create transaction, we try to do this here. So instead of in the create transaction, we can rather do it on the top. So I'm going to take this logic out of there. And here we can say something like const category object. And here it's going to be this. And instead of the category that we're providing in the create transaction, we are going to provide category object. And similarly, when we are using the update transaction, we are going to provide the category object, and this should solve the problem when we are updating. Now, one thing that I also noticed was, let's actually have a look there. So I'm gonna save this first, try this because I'm forgetting what problem I saw. So I see test 1,000 created, and now if I edit this, make it a 500 and update, the icon should still be there. So if I play this, you can see that if I refresh, the icon is gone. Oh, okay, Why is it gone? Let's see. So the transactions that we have, the category has icon classes, title, and value. This seems okay to me, but I don't get why this would be a problem. So in this case, if I go back to my icon, it says undefined. Interesting. Interesting. So when we use create transaction, do we create it for every? Yeah, so this should be here. So if I refresh, it should come here, transaction from storage, and then it says transaction.category.value. Okay. So we should also be passing in the create transaction rather the entire category here. So that's the problem. So we do category.value. So here we should rather pass the entire category and not just the value. And I'm thinking now, so then I don't really need that. I can just pass the transaction itself, right? So I can just pass the transaction and that should be good. So if I refresh now, let's see. So here, play, and now you can see that the icon came back. We are good. The only problem that I saw now is if I delete this, this is going to bring it back the 5,000, right? So if I do test and then I do 1,000, the only thing that is a problem right now is if I create this, it looks good. But if I update this to 500, it does not fix it on the transaction itself. It just fixes it on the wallet. So if I hit update, the wallet is fixed, but this is not fixed and this is resetted. Only if I refresh, then it works. So if I refresh, you can see that it got changed. So that means we are missing the point where we needed to upgrade, and I can remove this code because we are not using this. So the only problem that we are, or the only statement that we're missing is to update the transaction. So in here, if I go to a particular transaction, set form mode, blah, blah, blah. Then we also had update transaction, or actually transaction to edit dot update. This is where we did it, right? So in this update case, after we have updated the wallet and set the form, I would also want to run this dot render transaction. So I want to render transaction, just one, not all of them. And we don't have that function yet. So we're going to pass the transaction to edit in this case. And then we set the form where this gets null. So I'm going to go and create this transaction. We already have a function called render wallet. So I'm going to take inspiration from there. So render wallet. And here we have the function. Yeah. So we're going to create a same function here, render transaction. This is going to receive a transaction. This is going to be exactly the same thing. So we say transaction L equals, we get the element by ID by using the transaction ID. So the transaction ID is something like this. So we get transaction, or actually transaction underscore, and then we have the transaction.id. Then I think what we would want to do is to, let me actually think. When we render from storage, what do we do? So here we create a transaction and then we push the transactions. Okay. Oh, because when we create a transaction, we also add it to the UI. Okay, got it. Got it. Uh-huh. All right. So I'm thinking now. I'm thinking if there's a better way to do it. or would I have to change everything myself? Because I don't want to do that. We can just get the get HTML and it should render it. Mm. Let's see. Let's actually see. So when we do update render transaction, what I would want to do is I would want to get the transaction HTML, and then I would have to replace the transaction element with this. And can I get something like transaction element dot? Let's actually see. So we can say win dot transaction L equals transaction L. Actually, we should be able to get it anyway. So let's actually do that. I'm going to refresh, get this element, go and get it into a variable. So we got a temp1. If I do temp1 dot outer HTML, then we get everything, right? So I think we just need to change the outer HTML, and I think this should be good. So all I need to do in this case is just do transaction element dot outer HTML equals HTML. I think that's good. So if I go ahead and go and say something like edit, and then I make it 1000 instead, and then I find outer HTML, and then I hit update. So finally it comes with a transaction with the amount 1000. It goes ahead and then it gets the transaction HTML, which is this. So the HTML is the entire HTML that we would want to replace, but the new HTML has the amount as minus 1000 instead of a 500, right? And that is very important because we changed that. So now if we change the outer HTML with the HTML, which it looks exactly the same as you see. So then boom, you can see that the 1000 changed there. It goes out of the function now, and then it's setting the form mode again. But the fun part here is that I did not see the amount difference, or maybe I missed it. So now it goes from here. Oh, because the wallet is not rendered yet. Yes, because this 4500 should become actually 4000 because the total before was 5000. So in here and then boom. Awesome. This is super cool. Let's go. Yay. Why doesn't that work? Interesting. Interesting. My shortcuts are actually not working. All right. I'm going to have a look into that later maybe. Stream Deck. What happened to you? Never mind. And then the transactions are updated. So the good thing is that we have a really nice UI, or not the UI but functionality. So if I hit edit, I see this. If I hit cancel, it goes back. If I hit edit, it comes back. And I could essentially go ahead and delete it as well. If I delete the current transaction, and then now there are these corner cases. For example, what happens if I'm editing something and I hit delete? Then obviously this would be deleted, and it's still this would still be there, which we don't really want, right? So when we delete a transaction, or when we are editing a transaction, then we shouldn't be able to edit or delete any of the other transactions, right? So we can probably do that. So let's say when we have the edit use case, which is under handle transaction errors and edit transaction. So when we have the transaction to edit and we set the form mode to edit, oops, then in the edit case, we should go ahead and say document dot query selector all, or we could rather say this dot transactions list element dot query selector all button dot for each. So we are disabling all of the buttons inside the transaction list. Let's say there are further transactions list. So we say transaction 2, we set it to gift cards. This is credited and this is 1,000 as well. But let's say this was Apple Pay and we credited it. So now, ooh, look at that. What just happened there? What just happened there? The Apple Pay got this. So this wasn't happening in debit, or should it also happen in credit? Because it seems like this is a classic situation where we have the string being added to the wallet. Yeah, the amount is string. Yes, you gotta make sure that this is always a number. So what did I add actually? So let's do this. But before that, actually find the update method of the amount that we are adding. So be adding a new amount. Oh, because we are using transaction, because we are using amount, we should be using rather than transaction amount. So we say transaction dot amount and transaction dot amount, because the transaction amount is actually in number, right? And this is where JavaScript makes more sense, because when you're debiting, when you're subtracting, if you do 5,000 minus 2,000, which was actually happening right now, or actually it was 5,000 minus 2,000, then you get 3,000, which was working fine. But now if I add it, then you get this. Hit. Should I use Tailwind or SAS or Tailwind is enough? I think Tailwind, CSS. I love it. So this is going to be transaction amount in this case, and the amount is being converted here, which is good. So I think we should be good. So I'm going to go to application, clear everything, go here, click test, and here 1, 2, 3, or actually 1,000, debit it, make it close and shopping, create it. And now I'm going to create another one. I'm going to say gifts, and here we got gift cards, we credit it, we make it 1,000, but we add it to Apple Pay. We create it, and we got this as a positive one. And now you can see that this is also added. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to edit something, but also then making all the other buttons disabled. So I'm going to go ahead and do that within here. So where we have for each that I'm using right now here. So we got the button, and here we can go ahead and say button dot set attribute disabled true. So if I do this, refresh, and you can see now I cannot delete or edit anything, because right now I'm in an edit mode. So if I have to make it the other way around, I can do it when we are doing the set form mode to new. In that case, we can go ahead and do this. So we can remove the attribute, and now I can say this. So refresh, edit. If I cancel this, we good. If I update this, we also good. There you go, right? So easy peasy. A little JavaScript doing all the magic that it needs to do. So I'm gonna remove the 100 or actually 1,000, make it 500, which means that this was a 500 transaction to my wallet, which means 500 would be deducted from my wallet now. So it would be 2,500. So if I hit update, there you go. So our app actually is finalized, and how cool is that? The finalized, when I say finalized, I mean that we have the functionality actually working. I don't think we are missing anything, but if you think that we are missing something, then definitely let me know in the chat, and we are going to start looking into it. But in the next stream, I don't know when that would happen, most likely on Saturday, but in the next stream we are going to make it beautiful, and we are going to then finalize this as like a whole budget app crash course, maybe something like that. So I think this looks really good. Let me know your thoughts, and we are going to be using Tailwind CSS for this one. But for now, I'm going to sign off actually. And it was really fun working today. How long did we stream for? About 2 hours. And it's Monday, but I don't have to work today. I'm taking it off. I'm going to be resting, chilling out. And tomorrow on Tuesday, I'm starting on the new company that I'm joining, and I'm super excited about it. But so far, I think it's really good. So thank you everybody who joined. I love your faces. And just make sure that you take care of yourself, take care of your families, and obviously, as always, happy coding. Take care. Bye.